What if everything started working the moment you stopped trying so hard? When you let go of the need to please? When you truly gave up trying to fit in? It might sound reckless, even naive, especially in a world that taught us to perform, to smile on cue, to gain approval at all costs. But what if all that effort to be enough is precisely what's keeping you from yourself? For years, you've chased acceptance. You became what others expected, the loyal friend, the perfect partner, the efficient professional. But every time you wore another mask to be loved, you wandered further away from who you really are. And there's a cost to that. A slow exhaustion that no amount of sleep can fix. A quiet sadness that achievements can't soothe. A subtle emptiness that lingers even when life looks fine from the outside. We were sold the idea that caring what others think makes you wise, that pleasing is love, that compliance is maturity. But no one told you that living like this will quietly erase you. Because when your life revolves around being liked, you stop being. And when you stop being, your soul doesn't vanish. It hides, it fades, it begins to wither. It's not that you don't care anymore. It's that you can no longer recognize yourself in your words, your choices, your routines. Your body is here, but your essence, it's been missing for a while. What if it's time to come back? What if the real beginning isn't doing more, but finally stopping the act, stopping the adjustments, stopping the performance? Because when you stop trying so hard to matter to the world, maybe, just maybe, you start mattering to yourself. Since early on, you were taught that acceptance is the gateway to love, that being agreeable equals maturity, that silence means wisdom. And so, piece by piece, you began to abandon yourself. You softened your impulses, toned down your expressions, smoothed out your voice to make others feel comfortable. And for a while, it worked. But one day, a dull ache began inside you, without any obvious reason. It's not sadness in the classic sense. It's more like a subtle unease, a strange disconnection, as if your soul is walking half a step behind your body. You function, you show up, you smile, but there's a silent echo inside you that never quite fades. And no matter how much you achieve, impress, or distract yourself, something is still missing, a vital piece, something you can't fake, post, or earn. We live in a culture obsessed with appearances. The more you mold yourself to the expected script, the more applause you get. But that applause isn't really for you. It's for the role you're playing. And deep down, you know it. You know it's hollow, a sugar rush of validation that leaves you even more empty. It keeps you performing, but never fulfilled. The illusion is cunning. You believe you're choosing freely, but if you look closer, you'll see how many of your choices are infected by the fear of being unwanted. You say yes when your soul is screaming no. You stay in empty connections just to avoid rocking the boat. You tolerate routines that drain your spirit because that's just how life is. But is that truly living, or just not disturbing anyone? Jung spoke of the persona, the social mask we wear to function. And at one point, it served you, but the danger is mistaking it for your identity. The more you wear the mask, the easier it is to forget your original face. You smile, you play along, you fit in, but who are you beneath all that? Breaking the illusion hurts, because it means facing everything you faked in order to feel loved. It means admitting that much of what you built wasn't really for you. When the need to please becomes your way of existing, it stops being kindness and becomes quiet slavery. Elegant, polite, socially rewarded, but slavery nonetheless. This isn't about becoming cold or selfish. It's about remembering that you weren't born to please everyone, that your truth doesn't need permission, that your authenticity is worth more than their applause. Every time you dim your light to belong, your soul retreats. And one day, there may be nothing left to retreat to. Maybe this is the moment, the crack in the story, the chance to stop chasing approval and start cultivating truth, even if it's messy, even if it costs you connections, because what's at stake isn't your image, it's your liberation. There comes a point when it's no longer about feeling sad or tired. It's deeper than that. It's the unsettling sense that you've become a ghost in your own life. You're moving, breathing, making decisions, but nothing feels like it belongs to you. Your actions are automatic. Your energy feels borrowed. and your presence, though visible, is hollow. You're surrounded by people, yet you feel isolated. You respond to texts, show up at work, join the conversation, but internally, you've drifted far, far from your passions, far from that raw, creative pulse that once gave meaning to your days. When was the last time you did something simply because your soul asked for it, not because it was expected? This disconnection doesn't come in a dramatic explosion. It creeps in. It begins with choosing the safe path over the honest one, with silencing discomfort to avoid conflict, with saying nothing when something in you aches to speak. And little by little, you become a master of appearances. You smile with your face while your spirit flinches in silence, but the body keeps score. It speaks when your voice won't. It begins to ache, to tense, to break. Anxiety becomes normal. Restless nights become routine. Your chest feels heavy, not from heartbreak, but from holding in too much for too long. Your back carries not just stress, but years of pretending. And though you seem fine, you know you're not. You're on autopilot, and it's wearing you down. Each time you betray yourself to gain approval, a part of you fades. Every time you say yes to avoid disappointing others, you stray further from your inner compass. And eventually, being yourself feels like a risk. Showing up unedited feels dangerous. Like you might not be accepted if you don't wear your mask. We live in a world that rewards performance, where functionality matters more than truth, where vulnerability is treated like a weakness instead of the quiet strength it truly is. But what's the point of functioning if you're crumbling inside? What's the use of checking all the boxes if your soul feels like it's slipping away? And yet we continue, out of fear, out of habit, out of the belief that this is just life. But that belief, that resignation, is the very thing that's slowly killing you. Not dramatically, silently, invisibly. And you're not alone. Thousands feel this quiet agony and keep it buried, because the pain of not being yourself doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just lingers. But there comes a breaking point, a moment of collapse, a loss, a rupture, a wake-up call, something that shakes you out of the trance and demands you face the truth. And it's in that tremor, in the unraveling, that transformation begins. But to get there, you must walk through the fire. You can't numb it. You can't skip it. You must feel it, face it, and choose with full awareness that pretending is no longer an option. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists. What you accept transforms." And perhaps that's where this quiet emptiness begins. You've spent so long resisting parts of yourself, your doubts, your desires, your contradictions, that now you barely know how to feel them without guilt. You've learned to showcase your best self, but at what cost? Jung called it the persona, the mask we craft to function in society. It's not inherently wrong. We all wear one. But the danger comes when we forget it's a mask. When we start believing we are what we perform. When the version we present to the world becomes a prison instead of a tool. That fracture between who you show and who you are, that's where the existential wound begins. Friedrich Nietzsche urged us, become who you are, not who your upbringing sculpted, not who society labeled you to be, but the raw, untamed presence that still flickers under the rubble. Becoming who you truly are is not a poetic journey. It's a dismantling. It's a kind of death. It means walking through the desert of no longer belonging. It means risking comfort for truth. Søren Kierkegaard called this the despair of not being oneself. It's not ordinary sadness. It's the ache of living disconnected from your core, an internal abyss. But inside that abyss lies a voice, a silent scream for authenticity, not for something new, but for something ancient, a return to what you were before you became the role. Modern philosopher Byung-Chul Han describes our era as the society of performance. No one forces us anymore. We self-impose. We push harder, faster, always visible, always optimized. If we burn out, it's our fault, because we're free, right? But that kind of freedom, without inner truth, becomes its own cage, an exhausting one. And in the midst of this invisible pressure, we lose the most sacred thing, the inner connection. We forget why we're alive. We drown in metrics, likes, career milestones, curated identities. We keep reaching for meaning outside of ourselves. But the soul doesn't feed on numbers. It feeds on honesty, on coherence. This is where Stoicism whispers its wisdom. Epictetus, Seneca. They remind us, you can't control what others expect, but you can control how you respond. Living to satisfy the gaze of others is surrendering your sovereignty. Why hand over your power so easily? Here's the paradox. When you release the need to be liked, you don't become cold, you become real. You don't lose your humanity, you reclaim it. From that place, you don't just function, you connect. You choose. You live from alignment, not obligation. Coming back to yourself isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. Because anything built from disconnection becomes a burden. Anything decided through the mask eventually fractures. And you deserve a life that doesn't break you just for being honest. Philosophy isn't abstract here, it's a compass, a mirror, a trail inward. And every one of these thinkers, Jung, Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, Hahn, the Stoics, echoes the same truth in different voices. Stop pretending, stop pleasing, stop chasing what will never fulfill you, and start listening, because what you seek outside is already alive inside you. You've just forgotten how to hear it. Every deep transformation begins with a fracture, not with a tidy plan, not with a list of affirmations, but with a collapse. One day, you simply can't keep up the act. The smile becomes heavy, the roles lose meaning, and the idea of continuing as you are feels unbearable. You didn't ask for this breakdown, but here it is. Cracks in your reality, small at first, through which something begins to shine. It might be triggered by a loss, a crisis, or just the moment when the numbness finally screams. What seemed like the end is actually the doorway. Because when the mask finally shatters, what emerges is your face. Maybe unfamiliar, maybe fragile, but finally, yours. And even if you're not sure who you are without all the performances, there's a quiet liberation in putting down the weight. This is the threshold, the pivotal moment, the rebirth wrapped in chaos. It's when you decide, perhaps for the first time, to live in truth, to say no, even if they don't understand, to walk away from what dims you, to speak what you've buried for years, not out of rebellion, but out of reverence for the self you almost lost. Nietzsche captured this metamorphosis with a vivid image. The spirit, once a camel that carries and obeys, must become a lion that roars a sacred no, and only after that roar can the lion become the child, not as regression, but as rebirth. The child who plays, creates, breathes freely. The child who doesn't perform, he simply is. This journey won't unfold in a single sunrise. It's not an Instagrammable enlightenment. It's a daily, silent, gritty revolution. A process of unbecoming everything you were told to be. Of remembering what your soul always knew, but you forgot in the noise. And yet, something shifts. You feel it in your breath, in the soft relief of dropping what was never yours, in the sudden peace that comes when you no longer need to win anyone's approval. You stop running, and the truth finds you. You stop chasing, and what's real begins to stay. What once hurt you no longer reaches you. What once defined you now feels irrelevant, because this isn't the end of your story. It's the rewrite. And this time, you hold the pen. No longer a character in someone else's plot, but the author, the voice, the origin. You don't have to shout to reclaim your life. You just have to stop whispering your truth. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what your soul now knows. The old roles no longer fit. The mask no longer holds. And the game you once played, of approval, of perfection, of being enough, now feels hollow. You've changed. Something cracked open. And from that fracture, light began to leak through. Maybe you're still scared. Of course you are. The fear doesn't vanish just because you've awakened. You may still dread disappointing others, still fear losing connections, being misunderstood, or walking into the unknown without a map. But let me ask you this. What's more terrifying? Losing what was never truly yours, or continuing to betray what's most sacred within you? There's a quiet kind of sorrow in living a life that doesn't belong to you. It's not loud or dramatic. It's subtle. It looks like being fine. It hides behind smiles, achievements, and responsibilities. But deep down, you know. You know when you're shrinking. You know when you're performing. You know when your soul is begging for a different path, and you're still choosing comfort over truth. The world doesn't need another perfect professional, another polished persona, another echo. What it needs, what you need, is the return of the sacred self, the version of you that remembers, that speaks from the gut, that stops negotiating its value in boardrooms and comment sections, that burns quietly with purpose and presence, that doesn't just perform life, but inhabits it. And yes, it will cost you. Authenticity always costs. It might cost you relationships built on illusion, jobs that demand your silence, expectations that once kept you safely mediocre, but what you gain in return is something they can't teach in any course or sell in any package: clarity, coherence, freedom. Because when you stop bending, you start standing. When you stop performing, you start feeling. When you stop being what others need, you start being what your life is calling you to be. That calling doesn't shout, it whispers, in moments of stillness, in the ache that never leaves, in the strange peace you feel when you're finally honest. This is not a motivational speech. This is a sacred interruption, a rupture in the script, a moment outside of time where something inside you rises and says, enough, enough pretending, enough pleasing, enough postponing the life your soul is here to live. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to start listening to what hurts, to what excites, to what scares you in the best possible way. You start by honoring the part of you that's been waiting, quietly, patiently, through the years of noise, the part that still believes you were meant for more, not in a grandiose, egoic way, but in a deep, rooted, eternal way. And once you feel that spark, even just for a second, it becomes unbearable to keep living in the dark. So, here's the real question. Are you willing to disappoint the world to be faithful to yourself? Are you willing to lose approval to gain integrity? Are you ready to walk alone for a while so you can finally walk in truth? You don't have to do everything today. You don't have to burn your life down. All you need is one honest act, one refusal, one whisper of no more. Maybe it's a conversation you've avoided, a habit you need to end, a truth you've been silencing. Whatever it is, choose it. Not for show, not for drama, but for alignment, for inner peace, for the you that's been buried beneath roles, routines, and regrets. And if this message stirred something inside you, don't let it fade into the algorithm. Mark this moment. Make it sacred. Leave a comment, not just for the channel, but as a contract with yourself. Write these words below, if they resonate. I'm no longer what they expect. I am what awakens. And if you felt seen here, if your soul was named in these words, consider subscribing, not to follow a trend, but to stay close to this current. This space isn't for the masses. It's for the few who are done faking, who want depth in a world of surfaces, who are ready to walk the path inward and rise from there. Because in the end, it's not about becoming someone. It's about unbecoming everything that was never really you. And what's left after all the shedding is not weakness. It's not emptiness. It's power, sacred, silent, unshakable.